and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary, and general nonsense for the clinical research community.
Check us out at notetofilepodcast.com.
And now, without further ado, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to Note to File, a clinical research podcast.
A collection of interviews, candid commentary.
Oh my gosh. One mistake after another today with StreamYard, dude. What a mess. There's too many buttons. There's loop buttons and unloop buttons. And, we got there. We got there eventually.
Dual buttons, they'll get you every time.
Hey, but they're on different places. One's for like the little video thing. One's for the music. And, they're way far away from each other, having to scroll down the page. Hey, welcome to another Note to File Live. Sticky notes. Today's March 26th. Denali, how's it going?
It's going well, man. I can't believe it's the end of March. It's actually spring. I actually almost went on a walk today before I got too busy.
Wow.
The thought was there.
I almost went on a walk, she says. Congratulations. There'll be time for plenty more. Don't worry. Go ahead.
I said ideally. No, I had nothing. No.
Nothing at all? Okay.
Nothing. And we'll see you guys next week.
And that's it. You guys Tuesday. Today's some fun days. Today is a National Air Max Day, if you're into sneakers.
You gotta love that. I actually have 0 pairs of Air Max.
You have no Air Max at all?
I don't have any Air Max. I think I need to fix that. There's a couple that are dropping. They're just dropped. They had a whole, because of March Madness, they did a bunch of team Air Maxes, I thought.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe. But I don't know. I haven't gotten any. Maybe I'll get a pair. See if there's any cool ones.
Should look into it. There's a lot of cool Air Maxes. I used to like the
is it Air Max 95?
95 are the ones I like now. Gotten really into. And it's kind of cool. I don't see a lot of people wearing the 95.
Is the Air Max 90 the really common one that you see people wearing?
No, I think it's the Air Max 1.
Okay.
There's so many of them now. I get super confused.
How do you feel about them as far as so for example, Air Force Ones are a little bit heavier and thicker.
Yeah,
how do the Air Max wear?
They're more, I wouldn't say athletic shoe, but they seem to have especially the earlier, the Air Max 1s are a lot more comfortable for sure. The 95s are also a little bit heavy, but they're still comfortable.
Are they more like the foam posits or something?
Not quite that chunky.
Okay.
Necessarily. But they do have a little bit of a heel on them. I like them. I've been getting into the 95s, so
I'll have to check it out and get myself I'll have to celebrate today.
Yeah,
I'll have to buy a pair. There's really no other option.
No, I just got a pair of the Big Bubble 95s that came out today. That look like that.
Oh, damn. Yep, those are nice.
Pretty fun. And then they had a bunch that were sold out, so it looks like it's a fun day for Air Max because they usually get to release some different stuff. Air Max 90s. I see Air Max 90s. People do have a lot.
Yeah, I feel like I see a lot of those recently. Even my brother and sister-in-laws, they have a couple pairs of those, and they're not big sneakerheads. I feel like they're more maybe accessible.
Yeah,
they're not
for
as
sure. You'll see them on a shelf in the store more so than some of the other ones.
Maybe that's why so many Air Max were released today, because it's Air Max Day.
Wow, brilliant. That's why you're the co-host, because observations like that. Great job.
Death grip on the obvious I got going on here.
Brilliant. It looks like you're having some trouble on LinkedIn streaming, so if you're out there, say hi in the comments. I don't know why. LinkedIn just recently switched something with their streaming requirements as well, so I don't even know if it's working or not. So if you're in the comments, say hi.
Cool.
Today's also, it's a lot of days again today. National Spinach Day.
Okay. Not mad at a dark leafy green.
I see. I'm in team spinach over kale.
I would agree with that. Although, it depends. I guess it depends on what I'm using it for. There's a couple of things I like in soups. I'll absolutely do kale. It holds up a little bit better. But other than that, I'll do a good spinach.
Fair.
I'm a big fan of arugula, which is more of a lettuce than
Arugula's
like
pretty solid. Maybe not quite as can't do as much with arugula. I feel like it's something like spinach though.
well, I feel like you can cook with spinach because it holds up
Yeah,
better.
right.
And like arugula and stuff, you wouldn't just like lettuce, cook with it.
It's just gonna get all wilty and stuff. All right, today's also Equal Pay Day. An observance that symbolizes
Oh, I know this one.
pay disparity and wage gap between men and women. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, or I'm not sure if you're familiar with the statistics about.
It's something I might have heard of because this is what it says that where it's like this is the time in the year where like the percentage of the year versus percentage of pay of like that's like it's generally in March.
So basically, for a woman to have made as much as a man, they would have had to work instead of ending at the beginning of the year. They would have had to work through this day, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
I explained that terribly, but certainly, maybe you get people get the idea.
Yeah, it's like a year plus whatever you need in general wage disparities.
Yeah, which surely that'll go away anytime now.
Well, we equal rights we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah,
it's solved.
You guys can vote, so what's the problem?
Oh.
Today is also Wear a Hat Day, which I'm celebrating specifically by wearing a hat.
Today and every day.
Well, it's how it works when you're a tall, bald guy. Hat's an easy accessory. All right, rock and roll. What do we got? What do we got to talk about?
Got a couple of things.
Didn't set this up correctly one bit.
We are
there you go.
Killing it with StreamYard today.
Blank screen. Maybe I'm just a little out of sorts today. It's okay.
So I thought this one was interesting. So what's in a name? The ethics and psychology of oncology trial acronyms. And it talks about like how we name trials. And so like it goes into like, and specifically oncology, I'm actually wondering like how universal this is across therapeutic areas, but it talks about like the different names, like it talks about like Greek mythology and like Icarus trials and the Hercules trial and like naming things after mythical
like
characters.
I like, for whatever reason, that a trial for penile cancer is called Hercules. I don't know why. That seems somewhat ironic. I think Hercules is like big, tough dude.
Well, so they talk about that in like there's another one here which is like a prostate registry and they call it the IRONMAN, and it gets into this concept of like why we're doing this. And I think there's an element of like, yeah, we have all these ridiculous like we're study PC39-H2. Like, how do you remember that? It's not impactful. I'm not going to know it as someone running the trial, as a participant. It's not going to be like, okay, I'm in this like random collection of letters. So giving it a name that is recognizable makes sense. And that goes in and talking about specifically like what you were saying with like Hercules or Iron Man or these names that like invoke a feeling of like strength and power and like doing something good. But then it also talks about the ethics of that potentially as well, where it's like the Cinderella Trial, where it's like, okay, but that invokes the idea of like scullery maid becoming princess. So is in participating in this trial going to have similar effects? And so it talks about the ethical potential conundrum of like giving people like false hope or expectation based on the name and the connotation that name has. And so if I'm on a Cinderella trial, am I assuming that it's going to provide a glow up in some regard? Or if I'm on the Hercules trial, am I going to like defeat, like all of these monsters and like overcome my cancer? And like, is it giving me false hope as a participant? Which is an interesting sort of take they had on this. But I do at some level understand like trying to give it relatable names so it becomes something more tangible.
Yeah. I mean, I do think it's fair. And like I'll say, like, companies like, hey, AstraZeneca, come up with better naming conventions for your trials. They're all D67250003. And they're all almost identically the same. And I can't tell you how many times I've had trouble like identifying a trial because they're all so similarly named with the same template. On the flip side of that is like, look, I don't want to see another trial called Summit. You know how many Summit trials I've done like in the last 15 or 20 years? Like it's so many. And then I say Summit and now it's like, well, which study is that?
Which one? Well, and they mentioned that, like, as you think about naming, you should avoid really common terms like select or like whatever, like Summit could be an example of that, where it's like, don't use particularly common names because for indexing, that becomes a fucking nightmare to try to keep track of these like common pieces. So it gives some like general thoughts of like avoid words like hope and cure and that type of thing, which like no shit. Avoid some of the common things from like an indexing perspective, so everything's not named Summit, for example. But then there's
or name them all. You know, who cares? Just go the opposite, completely opposite way. Call them all Summit.
But the other thing they mentioned, and this I thought was funny, which is like you give this trial a name at the onset, and like maybe that backfires, where it's like you give it a name, and I don't remember the example they used in the article, but it was something like a rational something or other. But it was like then the outcomes of it didn't meet that criteria. So you're naming something at the beginning. The other piece too is like we talked about naming something like Cinderella or Hercules or IRONMAN, but like the one that they used at the beginning I found interesting, like Icarus. Like, okay, but like Icarus, well known, flying too close to the sun, right? Like, would that backfire and have a negative connotation for those who are familiar?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't want to get too crazy. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to go in a study called, Mephistopheles or something. Like,
right.
Don't get too cute with it.
So it's interesting, but I did like the concept of it because it gets into, I think, one of the next things we want to talk about too, where like you start thinking about branding and like the branding of a trial, and the name is for sure a huge piece of that, like how you're branding it.
Yeah, I think this is cool. So first of all, shout out Paul Lifson, writes a nice little Substack that's really focused on patient recruitment space. But he kind of talks about, similarly, marketing clinical trials during the advertising process. And, sort of taking the approach of, developing a whole trial brand. And I think I've seen this for sure. When everything's branded, I got branded backpacks and branded
for a trial.
Branded little, pens to hand out. And then the advertising is all branded with a particular style. And he kind of goes into, some of the marketing philosophy behind this and, ads getting all the same single brand treatment. His defense, the study brand is kind of loosely used. Brands are really intended to live indefinitely, maybe forever. And the goal of brand marketing is to build up a broad base that recognizes and appreciates its uniqueness. A clinical trial ad campaign, on the other hand, only enrolls for a little while. It's only intended for a very specific audience. And it really, what it's trying to do is get people to, take immediate action. So really a unified brand model doesn't necessarily fit that well when it comes to clinical trials. And I would tend to probably agree with that.
Well, it's interesting because when you said like you get like backpacks and stress balls, like that to me, like the first thing I jump to is like post-market pharmaceuticals, where like that is super common, where you do want a single unified brand for a drug, right? Like it has a logo and a color scheme, and you can, when an ad comes on, what it's going to be for. And so you want that experience. So like in sense of like the post-market pharma world, they're just sort of pulling that into clinical trials, which makes sense. They're familiar with it. They have a process. I'm sure they have all templates and everything on how they manage a drug brand, and then pulling that into clinical trials is interesting. On one sense, I get it, because you're starting to develop that brand awareness during trials, and then as the trial extends and goes to post-market, ideally it goes through approval and gets on the market, you've already established that brand at some level, and you just carry it through to post-market. So I get it in some sense, to like establish a drug brand, But as far as recruitment, I think it's an interesting concept because I think Paul gets at this, right? Where he talks about
Yeah. He goes more into the idea of segmenting your audience versus being maybe hung up on a clinical trial, a brand. When a person who's in the 1% who might think they're eligible for a trial, you want them to think, oh, this looks like it's relevant to me. So, it's a better idea to work out the target audience and, usually there's only 2 to 3 good answers that cover most of what that target audience might look like. So he gives another example of a trio of ads that, looking at them, you'd have no idea that they're from the same trial. There's not consistent branding, but they all appeal to different sort of, what's the word?
demographic and market segments, right?
Yeah.
And
of that particular, disease state. So
folks with lupus, you're going to fall in one of these buckets, maybe.
You're appealing to people in different ways versus being hung up on trying to maintain a brand. And again, I would go on a limb to say I think that's probably something we've seen work better in general. We've seen worked with companies who've done A/B testing and changed things and find, that a few of these work best, but there's no consistent branding across them. And frankly, patients don't care. Patients aren't saying, put me in the Cinderella trial. Like they're seeing an ad that's like, oh, I have this
lupus.
disease state. Exactly. So I kind of agree. I tend to agree with Paul. I think it's useful for us as researchers because, how do I refer to a trial within my team, to my PI, to my referring physicians? It's really hard to say, you have a patient to refer for study D67530900001-002. No, you want to say the Summit trial. And actually, more specifically, I want to say the AstraZeneca hypertension trial, if I'm being really honest. So a lot of that stuff's going to go out the window anyway, but it's nice internally for teams, I would say.
Well, it's interesting because I think from a recruitment perspective, if you're also looking to increase diversity of recruitment and you're trying to recruit different segments of the population, they're going to want different mediums, platforms, and different advertising imaging, right? They're going to want different branding, and it's not even branding. It's to that point, it's a different way of because it's not a brand at that point because it is so varied. You're not trying to create a brand. You're trying to get.
Well, no, I mean, and again, I'm not a marketing or salesperson, but I would think you're going to look into demographics of the patients with these afflictions or diseases, and you're going to say, what are the archetypes of these, people, and you want to try to appeal to those archetypes, right? And that has nothing to do, in my mind, with creating a consistent brand. They don't care.
Well, and then it gets. I agree with that. I think, and I understand the concept, and I guess maybe this gets into this whole advertising of pharmaceuticals at a larger scale because I tend to how much should patients be driving their providers to prescribe them a particular drug versus how much should that. I mean, this is a segment. It's just where does this start? And it's leaking further and further into if we're trying to brand therapeutic agents and investigational drugs that aren't even approved. What is the why? Right?
Yeah. And again, I think it's probably especially for the patients, it doesn't matter.
Right.
I wish I knew more about this type of stuff or had more time to delve into it because I've seen things just, in my sort of outside looking in position in advertising where, we ran a trial for patients who had below the knee leg amputations and were suffering from phantom limb pain. And we had a central company, but we worked very closely with them. And we actually, since we were so successful, we gave them a lot of feedback. We got to hear a lot about the process, which I found fascinating. And, one of the things that really jumped out to me is they're all right, we ran 2 types of ads. One showed, people being active and happy and moving and doing things, out in the world with their amputation. Those did not do as well as the ones that showed people in pain and, upset or otherwise, clutching their pain. And if you think about it, I mean, I guess you could say either one would be good. Oh, like, look, this is what you could be like, if you got good treatment and you're out here. But the truth of the matter of reality is that the patients we were trying to reach are patients who are in pain and are living that life of, having excruciating, debilitating pain at all times. And those ads tended to do exceedingly better.
Well, I mean, it's like this whole like carrot or stick component
Yeah.
of it. And like,
Right.
honestly, it's, I mean, we've talked about this, how like clinical trials recruitment is kind of sales in a way,
Sure.
but like in the commercial side of things, it's the same concept of like, you're working with people, you say, hey, I want to sell you what I have. And like saying, hey, look how cool this is. Look how wonderful this is going to make your life versus, hey, what are you struggling with? What are your challenges?
Yeah, right.
And like being able to make the pain of the status quo enough to make them change. Because people are a lot more likely to make a wholesale change or shift when confronted with like current pains and barriers versus like, this is going to make my life super cool if I do this versus like, if I don't do this, this is going to be my challenge. And so it's like, it makes sense. I mean, I think I see that in the commercial side of things from a vendor perspective pretty regularly. So it makes sense that you'd see that in patients too.
Yeah, I would. Yes, I would echo that. I think that's true. Okay. Well, again, that's something I'm really fascinating, and especially as we ramp up and do more advertising. So I know Paul's out there doing some consulting nowadays. So reach out to him. He knows his stuff when it comes to the patient recruitment space. So there's a plug for Paul. He didn't even pay me. I'll send him an invoice. Actually,
that's let me save.
Lastly, we've got some more clinical leader stuff. Shout out Dan Shell and Abby. I think this one was Abby's baby here. We've got talking about site staffing being on the upswing, but still a challenge. I think we got our perennial guy who does research about research, Ken Getz. Ken, trying to get you back on the show, buddy. So love to talk to you. Come on. And the conversation with him and Jimmy Bechtel. It's interesting. Did you read much into this one?
I did not have a ton of time, but I looked at generally like it talked about the swing of staffing issues, which came out of COVID, right? Which like makes sense, right? Like that's when everyone's workforce and style of working got totally rocked. But how it's still a challenge, especially with like the different areas where, especially like incentives and like how do you maintain and keep workers at sites, especially when incentive models are not as strong on the site side compared to other places they could go.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, the article touches on a couple of things that have been discussed for quite some time. I've been talking to another site owner who's been struggling, maintaining staffing. Talks about some of sort of the things we hear. I think Jimmy makes a good point that I feel certainly is that most sites, the structure of them is relatively flat. I mean, again, it's going to depend on size, but most are relatively flat, meaning that you're not going to get. There's not 6 promotions you can give to a research coordinator. You can get crazy and you can say a senior coordinator.
Coordinator 1, 2, 3.
Super awesome senior coordinator. Maybe give them a little bit more management. You
giving us a peek into your
stuff.
your HR program.
At some point, you just start making stuff up. I mean, I think, and he even mentions too, which I think is interesting. There's really only a few multi-billion-dollar site corporations that are sort of vertical enough to create those opportunities. Which, as you can imagine, did I not share this? As you can imagine, again, just doesn't create a lot of opportunities for coordinators. And so you've got coordinators who want to, write out site work for a couple of years, go work for a CRA, make considerably more money. Sounds miserable to me, but maybe no more miserable than working at a site for that matter.
Well, I think, I think that's an interesting concept though, because I think site work is, far as I understand it, quite different than going to a CRO or pharma, even if it's like adjacent, and you also get more money, but the work and expectations is very different. And I think it's easy to see grass is greener too. And I
Well,
think that's a big problem.
to that point, I think what, at least I've been able to lean in. I think I've had to fire people, but I haven't had anyone leave for, a different opportunity within, the industry. And not that that's not a, not a flex on my part. I'm just saying that I do think what sites can offer, it is unique in that, a lot of people don't want to travel. A lot of people have kids that they got to get to school. A lot of people have all kinds of situations that, wouldn't other companies or other parts of the industry would not be nearly as flexible with that sites can be.
Yeah.
And I think that's extremely undervalued and underrated at
Well.
times because, I think, again, if somebody's got a, and not to pick on any particular, if there's a single mother or someone, someone who can't just up and leave, doesn't want to leave their family to travel,
Yeah.
have 20 days on site, 10 days on site, per month working as a CRA, then it's not a bad place to be. And frankly, I think if sites could continue to be made a little bit better, a little more whole through, sponsors paying them on time, like, you can pay your coordinators a very reasonable and competitive salary. It's not always the case when you're waiting 90 days for payments. That we can get into that some other time, as if I haven't already 1,000 times. But I think sites have to lean into that, if they want to keep good people.
So here's my thing though: is that the universal experience for sites, or is that because where I'm getting at? Because for me, I work on the vendor side of things, and for me, that's how I choose where I want to go is folks who have good culture, good work-life balance.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get that at vendors, at sites, because I'm sure there also are sites that are much more stringent.
Oh yeah,
you have to be clinic here, and here. So I think there's an element of some of it's just going to be by nature of the job. But again, CRAs, the more we go to remote monitoring, do you have to have 10 days on site? It changes as well. But I think you mentioned something interesting about the flatness, which I think is interesting, where it's people want to advance in their careers. And I'm not saying people want to necessarily climb ladders, right? You can advance in ways that are not necessarily climbing the corporate ladder. And I do think there's a ton of benefit to flat structures at organizations at some level. I think people build in unnecessary hierarchy for so many reasons. But that is a challenge within that, is to make sure people still feel like they have growth opportunities and advancement opportunities within that structure, which I think probably plagues sites pretty consistently.
Yeah, I think so too. That's why I don't know. Pay your coordinators more, make more money, give them more. Frankly, again, unless you're building a career as a coordinator who wants to move up the chain, it may not be as important that they have a bunch of fancy titles, but if they're well taken care of financially and you're able to support them and the time off that they need, or be flexible, at least a little bit flexible with the schedule, that's stuff that you're probably not going to get, especially as a junior CRA,
Yeah. Well, and I also think there's an element of I don't know, maybe I'm just a nerd this way, but something that's super important to me professionally is obviously fair compensation, but the ability to grow and learn, not necessarily in title, but in skill set. I'm learning new things. I'm exposed to oh shit, I've never done this type of, work before. I'm learning how to do this. I'm learning how to forecast in this way. I'm learning, there's all these different things you can grow and learn. And so providing those opportunities, and sites seem like they would have a really rich field of that, because there is so much being done that you master this, great. Here's something new. Or hey, there's always room for improvement. You see something needs improvement, be proactive and come up with a solution for it. So I seem like there's some good opportunity there if you have the right culture.
Yes. And sites are, we talked about this before, but again, a coordinator is not a coordinator. There's a breadth of things that happen at a site that you can make available to your coordinators. Great, you know how to, enroll patients. Let's learn regulatory. You want to know how to negotiate a budget. You want to know how to go do business development. You want to know how to, manage data. You want to know all kinds of things. So you can provide some of those, yes, it's not maybe as flashy on paper, but it's, you're learning and growing and getting to do cool new stuff. And again, I don't know how much sites lean into that. I'll say that the previous places I worked, that was not really just be at your desk from 8 to 5 and, hopefully you're getting some work done, but almost that was, these places get more concerned about attendance than they do, getting shit done and learning and growing. And I get it. You got to show up to be able to make that stuff happen, but come on, sitting at your desk from 8 to 5 and not accomplishing anything is not accomplishing anything.
Yeah. I mean, but I think again, it comes back to like almost even less so function. Like I've worked at jobs that will not be named that is very much that way. I was like, this is what you do, operate in your box. Don't have concerns that someone else, like, don't stay to your lane. And then like prior to 2020, it was, you have to be here 9 to 5. And I was like,
right.
My approach with my team members, like, if you're going to get 40 hours of work done in 20 hours, good for you. If you're going to get 20 hours of work done in 40 hours, like that to me is a bigger concern because that means you're inefficient and probably not good at your job. So do your job, do it well. I don't give a shit where you are.
Right.
But I think it comes back to like the culture of the site, of the vendor, of the CRO or sponsor, all kind of like plays into what that looks like.
I don't disagree. Cool. You guys got anything else?
No. It's next week, April already?
Next week is April.
Whew.
Sneaking up. Cool. Well, we'll be back on Tuesday.
That's the one.
Quiet day today.
I mean, we should probably check LinkedIn to see what their deal is.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm sure it works. Just nobody wants to watch us
anymore. Also very fair.
Not going to stop me. All right. Well, very cool. Thanks, guys. We'll be back on Tuesday. See ya.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to Note to File. We're committed to continuing to bring you independent and unfiltered coverage of the clinical trial industry.
We want to talk about what you want to hear. So if you have something on your mind, hit us up at notetofilepodcast.com.